Hello, hello, Dan. Thanks for joining me on my podcast today.
Thank you. I'm glad this worked out. I sometimes all this technology just gets to be kind of silly, but this is good. That's good to
Yes,
see you.
it is always good to see you. And I know that you've been super busy. I've been trying to keep up with the wandering weights. And I have to say, I get a little sad now because at the end, I miss our sword in the stone, but then I can just open the document and read it if I feel compelled
Because you
to.
have a copy, don't you? Yeah. Well,
Yes.
I keep thinking I should just go back and and redo it, and it just it took me 4 years to do that document, and what is it, an eighth of a million words?
Oh
And
my goodness.
when you add up, a million words is a lot, and but an eighth of a million is, I mean, that's got to be two, three, four books. Yeah, well, maybe. But and I look at it, and I'm proud of what I did, and it's good. And I'm actually, the chapter you've asked me to talk about is a course where my personal motto comes from: never let go. So
Mhm.
it's a good one. It's here. Cheers.
Cheers. Yes, absolutely. And it's, even though I'm in Florida, it is a little chilly here. So I've got my hot tea as well. And so this
Yeah.
is quite nice. We're sharing a cup of tea. And yeah, it's always exciting when, the word education or education, as they say in the book, comes up.
Dedication.
Education in the book, and it immediately makes me think about you, of course. And so I of course always enjoy kind of going back through and looking and reading because it's so
Mhm.
fascinating even today that I'm always catching something new or still having to look things up. And it kind of
Yeah.
makes me think I need to just reread every book I've enjoyed.
Well, I listened to several Harry Potter podcasts, and the one I like the sauna to is called "The Sacred Scripture: Harry Potter and Sacred Scripture." And these two theologians discuss. They're in divinity school, but they discuss it and they use the toolkit of divinity school. And I find it interesting sometimes, the layers that can come out in a book. Um, I mean, you could turn any book you want into sacred scripture by reading it up and just keep pulling things out of it. We bless the book by our blessings.
Mhm.
It becomes sacred because we've made it holy, and I think that's actually kind of a nice, you know I've heard it, and please don't take this as any kind of, but the idea of living together versus getting married. It's the blessing, and it's where attempting to make something holy. Yeah, and it's interesting because even non-believers still, and I understand all this. I certainly understand that. I'm worried I'm going to get myself into a bad corner here, but even non-believers will often get married and do the sacred rites because rites, the rites are important to us people, to us humans. We need to make those clear. There are moments in life that we need to stop and go, wow. So yesterday, for example, something sacred happened to me. I'm going through a tough time. Maybe we'll talk about it off camera.
Okay.
But my nephew Brian, who of course his father Phil was the one who died 2 years ago. God bless him.
Mhm.
And my nephew sent me my father's um, jacket from the army with all of his stripes. He had the three. He's a sergeant, three stripes on top and three on the bottom. And so today, I got it yesterday, and today I took it over to a frame shop that I have great respect for. You ever come to my house, you'll notice I spend a lot of money on framing. I'm a big, I think it really highlights. In fact, my sword in the stone thing over there is in a beautiful frame. Um, but I got this jacket from my father that he hasn't worn since World War II. And of course, my dad died 30 years ago this year, October 30th. Officially, he died, but we found the body on the 31st.
Mm.
And so 30 years after my father died, I got his jacket in the mail. So the first thing I did is, I took it over to the frame shop. They're going to frame it. And in the frame, they're going to include a picture of my father in that jacket and a picture of my mother when my dad was on the road. So, and so what we do as humans is when something like this happens, we can either, toss it in the bin, not the bin that our European listeners think, but a bin, and put it under a bed or in a
Mhm.
shelf. I want to make sure that, it's important to me that I don't have very much from my mom and dad. My mom died 41 years ago, and everything I have from her is sacred. And so when I did my whole sword in the stone thing, I want to say at certain parts of it, I took lines out of them, and it's going to sound odd to say this out loud, but I blessed them. I said,
Mhm.
this is an important, this line is more important. Yeah, you can read the book and enjoy it and throw it up on the shelf. Got it. But this line changed my life. Or the 300th time I read it, as we had mentioned in an earlier one, the first time King Arthur meets Merlin is the last time Merlin meets him. And Merlin famously says, so soon, because he realizes that their friendship is almost over. You can read this book once and miss the point. You can read it twice. You can read the book 100 times. And finally, you realize that it is the saddest moment you will read in a book.
Yes. Yes, and
Uh,
everything you just shared, I'm like, oh, it's very emotional. So one, thank you for taking the time today. Of course, I want to be
yeah.
mindful of your space, and so
Well, but it
you
was what
can
you did.
always reschedule with me, by the way.
No, no, but it's also what you did for your father with that little documentary
Yeah,
that I enjoyed so much.
thank you.
Your father's story needs to be enshrined. It needs to be remembered. Someone who jumps off a boat to become an American, these jackasses, and I said the kindest word I can think of them. These anti-immigrant jackasses don't realize. And as a child of immigrants, I can speak on this. Uh, just because I look like this doesn't mean I don't have a backstory. And as a child of immigrants, I can say, many people come to this country and will jump off of a boat to get here. And instead of deriding them, we should embrace them and thank them. And they do. And your father and my father have made a difference in this country.
Hmm.
They both came from other places, and they both made this country a better place. And a hell of a lot they've done. Both your father and my father did a lot more than a lot of these, and again, kindly just call them jackasses who attack immigration and the cultural gifts that we get from everywhere around the world.
Hmm.
I'm only a discus throw away from uh, 10 different international cuisines, some as delicious as Del Taco, and others are some are more like, there's a place called Mint not far from here, which is a very extraordinarily good sushi place. But there's a Middle Eastern place over there, and how much worse would we be as a culture without the foods and the smells and I my lunch today was kimchi with oatmeal. I mean,
Wow, that's
that's
quite a combination.
on my Instagram account, I tell you how I do it. But you know, kimchi and sauerkraut, that Eastern European food, and kimchi, that Korean food, are staples of my diet.
Mhm.
And it's I'm more than just dairy. My ancestors, dairy, oats, the Irish dairy and oats, and then of course much later potatoes.
Mhm.
Yeah, I am gifted by the gifts of everyone who comes here. That was a long-winded thing, and I apologize.
No, never apologize for always speaking so articulately and honestly. And it's always appreciated,
Thank you.
especially for this audience anyway, for
Mhm.
me. But I couldn't agree more. And I loved the image of that jacket going into a frame with the photo. And if you ever come to Florida, you'll also see that at the end of that documentary, we're looking out at a piece of land and we're like, it's next to the temple. And now there's a cultural center
Huh.
in which I was able to frame a lot of my father's like calligraphy that was gifted to him and
Mm.
artifacts and pieces of work that just really wouldn't be in existence, right? And so just so many things, and that process of doing that, of actually like, because I actually did it with my student who is the expert at photography and framing and art, but like I curated this museum, and there was something really special to that, like kind of just giving each of those pieces a moment of thought and reverence, I guess is so when you say, you know, you would bless things and when you're reading a line or something, I think it makes complete sense because
Mhm.
there are certain things like art and poetry and writing and things like that that really can move us, and I think we're in such a fast-paced society that it's horrible that we will miss it most of the time, and so taking that moment of reverence and taking that moment to appreciate something, I think is more than worthwhile.
Mhm.
So I love that. Oh my goodness, I definitely want to see it when it's finished
Oh,
or when
sure,
it comes
sure,
back.
sure,
That would be
sure.
wonderful.
My little Hall of Fame in there, gladly. Yeah. Well, let's begin. We're gonna
Okay.
still talk about. Are we still gonna talk about the Sword and the Stone?
We
Okay.
always do. We always do a little bit of everything, right?
Okay. Okay.
My show could be
Um,
called like tangent talk. So the, you know, right on this on the first page, of course, it sets up where it's a cold, wet evening, and you know, Wart. It's interesting because it often starts with him just kind of either bored or stuck indoors because
always
it's
bored.
raining,
Always bored.
or
Yeah, he is
and
a White does a nice job understand. I think White does a good job. Very often, books about adolescence, pre-adolescence, don't capture. It's not just moodiness. It's more than that. You know, as a former boy myself, I know that you got all those hormonal changes, and frankly, you always get cut out of things. As a child, you miss a lot of stuff. You're not going to be sitting around saying pass the port over and over. You're going to get bored. Now, one thing about this chapter is that when you read Harry Potter, the first book, there are many standalone chapters. You don't need to. I'm probably the one that would be most famous is the when Hagrid has Norbert the dragon. That's a standalone chapter. Now, it comes back later. There's references back,
Mhm.
but you could read that chapter without reading anything before or
Right.
anything after. I mean, you'd have to, there might have to be a comma. Hagrid was, the groundskeeper at Hogwarts. Okay. There might have to be a comma. Harry Potter's, a young wizard boy. You might need two sentences to explain the scene. When you read The Sword and the Stone, now I'm going to pull the ants and the geese stories out of the bad
Mhm.
translations and stick them to where they should be in the Book of Merlin, the fifth book. They're very appropriate there. They make sense there. They don't do a very good job here. In the original book, the standalone chapters would be when Wart becomes a fish. You could take that one chapter and put that in an anthology, and the readers would follow along very well. You got a magician who talks to Neptune, who turns the boy into a fish. There's a conversation about power, and they end up, breathing out hard in the lung. The next chapter, and it's over. The chapter we're reading right now with the hawks, the raptors, that chapter can stand alone. The chapter with the badger, late in the book, the last transfiguration, you do need to read the one before with the hedgehog, the chapter before with the hedgehog. But that sort of kind of stands alone when he's transformed into an owl later in the book and meets Athena. That chapter stands alone. And of course, when he hangs out with the snake, Teenatrix, that chapter can stand alone.
Mhm.
So one of the things I guess I want to do before we start is understand that the transfiguration chapters oddly could be almost pulled out of the book. Now, it's like what they did when they first released The Sound of Music in Japan. They cut the musical bits out because they
Oh,
didn't think
really?
the audience, yeah, they didn't think the audience would like them. And my thought is, well, boy, jeepers, I understand they don't, but climb every mountain by it. That's a pretty good scene. And it's just, yeah, it'd be like taking a Marvel movie and taking the fight scene at the end out. You'd have a 15-minute show, um, and it would still suck. Oops. But so these chapters stand alone, but they breathe a lot of life into the story, and it gives us the philosophical foundations. I hope I wanted to talk to you about that just as a setup to understand the
Yeah.
chapters better. Yeah.
Of course. And you touched on something when you said, "Oh, always, he's always bored," and teenage boys and everything. And I can't help as a teacher of sorts now think that kids aren't bored enough because there's so much distraction, and the fact that boredom usually leads to creativity, and in this book especially, his boredom always leads to an educational moment. But what are your thoughts on that?
That's just outstanding. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for listening. We'll be back.
No, well, I mean, I'm sure
No,
that
it
I
is.
heard it from someone smarter that kind of
It's
correlated
an
that, but it really stuck
absolute
with
game
me.
changing point, because you're absolutely right here. There is a certain boy. Um, when I was at Utah State, we had a television. Now, one of the guys came back from Christmas vacation, brought a television, and he was up on the 6th floor. And then we had a television in the basement, but basically the guys who watch TV just lived down there. We had one radio station, Cache Valley 61 KVNU for the weekend bump bump. Trust me, that's all we had, AM radio. Because we couldn't get FM up in Logan at the time, and we had very few, and you had to have record players, and you had to bring those to school. And so very often we would do adventures. My junior year, I would walk into the university center and look up on the wall, and I'd see that Tuesday nights there was a Tuesday night a dance recital free to students. Tuesday night I'd go to a dance recital. Thursday night there was a movie for $1. I'd go to the movie for $1. And what happened is that, I learned this from my roommate Rick Hansen, is that you got to go do all these things. You got to go to the art gallery, because that is what education is. Yeah, there's a lot of book learning that goes on in school, but that's not. I mean, I got exposed to the arts because of this. I got exposed to so many other things, and frankly, what did I miss? I mean, at the time, it was the crappy years of Happy Days. I missed Love Boat, Fantasy Island. I mean, it was the Friends shows of their time. None of those shows stay up very well. They don't, stay. They don't. They
They don't hold up.
they,
Yeah.
they don't hold up well.
Yeah.
The early Happy Days, the first season when Fonzie Ora blew Windbreaker, those still hold up, but the rest are disasters. I mean, just so bad.
It's been a
Uh,
while since I've seen one.
well, if the original 5 or 6, when they came in as a late season replacement,
Okay.
Fonzie's in a Windbreaker. He's not
Okay.
yet.
Not
He's
in the
not yet
leather jacket.
he's not yet a cultural icon, and they didn't do it in front of live audiences, which just ruins shows, I think. Um, I think there's what you're saying has a lot of genius. If you're to take a boy that lives in 2021 and say, okay, you can go ride horses, shoot, arrows, you can practice sword play, you can swim in a moat. I mean, little Danny John be like, yeah. And that is always, of course, it is the allure of the past, when people talk about the good old days of the 1950s, I'm always quick to remind people, yeah, in my neighborhood, we had a lot of guys who were missing limbs from World War II. We had I had family members who were not right in the mind. We call it post-traumatic now. Back then, we just said, we just were quiet around them. Certainly, you wouldn't want to be Black in America. You wouldn't want to be Asian American, Pacific Island American, Mexican American in the 50s. They weren't good old days. They were good old days. And the problem is, and the same happens with, like, for example, I know with the Catholic Church, we're getting a whole group of these far, far right people taking over the church, and a lot of young people, extremely rigid. And they love this church that frankly never existed. They're in love with this thing that never existed.
Right.
I already think, I look back on my childhood, and we didn't. I mean, if you stayed in the house, mom made you do chores, so you played outside all the time. And I look back fondly on those days, but I have to be careful because I lived in a dangerous neighborhood. There were places you didn't go.
Mm.
Uh, you had to be, I was in a number of fights to prove things. Uh, there was that too. So you're right. There is a value to boredom because it does get that edge. It rubs, and the rubbing is what makes life worth meaning. To quote Tony Robbins, that gives it the juice of life.
Mm.
The juice. You want to be full of juice.
100%. And so that's why I always love that, this almost this image of Wart just sitting out looking at the window if it's raining and just
You're
sighing if
feeling
it's
well.
too hot. He's so,
Ah,
yeah, really like, and
yeah.
then then he goes on to his next adventure is usually
Mhm,
what
mhm.
kind of follows. And so of course, he says, I think I ought to have some more education and I can't think of anything to do. And Merlin says, you think that education is something which ought to be done when all else fails. Well, actually, he said it nastily, I should say, inquired Merlin nastily. He was in a bad mood too.
Yeah.
So, well said the wart, some sorts of education. So I love that piece.
And now remember, this is also building up to the big story with Kay and the Griffin or the Wirren, depending what translation you got, because Kay is going to start to feel very jealous about not
Yes,
having these
left out.
opportunities. Yeah, which of course leads us to Wart breaking his collarbone and all the other stuff. So it is kind of nice that you're starting to get a little momentum here in the story. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm wondering here what your thoughts were on, like, do you feel at this point Wart understands what his education is, or is he just looking for an answer to the boredom, or like how Merlin has presented it to him? He's like, well, I guess I need education now because I'm bored. So it's like, where do you think he is in his, his learning curve, I guess?
Or it's a little boy who's bored.
Yeah, pretty much. As
And
simple as that, right?
and yeah, and that's just when we got bored when I was young, we got destructive, and we break things, and nothing's ever changed. So
I love it. And so look, fast forward a couple pages, and I guess he's also saying, correlating his education to becoming animals or transfiguration and it being
mhm.
these kind of wild adventures. And I like when Merlin says, like, you may just as well sit down for the moment and learn to be a human being. And I don't know why. I just really found that, like, on so many levels, because not just literally be a human being, but I feel like he's trying to tell him something kind of more profound there. Not quite sure what exactly, but I
Now,
feel like it's there.
and remember, Arthur doesn't remember these transfigurations in the
Mm,
later books. He
that's
doesn't
right.
remember,
Yeah.
and there's a mist about these transfigurations.
Hmm.
Um, and and honestly, I mean, I like the other books. I'm a big fan. I thought the way they described Lancelot and his training, I think was great. The ill-made knight, I love that section. But there's something special about the transfigurations that just really carry this book along.
Hmm.
I put it, and then the lessons he learns. The best lessons he learned are in the transfigurations.
Hmm.
All
Hmm.
right, let's kick this off. Less pontificating by me.
Okay, no, this is why I'm talking to you. So I always get a little, not lost, but like whenever he is really in it and like the birds are doing their talking, or the raptors, and they're having their whole conversation, and it's like Balin, I guess.
Balin.
Balin and
I think
Balin.
it's Balin and Balin, yeah. And the
Balin and
name
Balin.
Balin and Balin show up throughout medieval history. Yeah, those are
Hmm.
those are very popular names. Yes.
And so what is it that, okay, so he wants to be a Merlin, and so I know that there's the part about him kind of a little bit of flattery there.
Yeah.
I made a little note of that somewhere, and I'm like flipping through my pages. But yeah, so I thought that was really cute that Wart kind of was throwing a little flattery Merlin's way, especially because he came off a little grumpy in the beginning. And I thought that was like very, a little sneaky, but at the same time, it was cute. And then, he goes off onto this adventure and he's supposed to, I guess, answer the questions properly. I'm trying to find my
Well,
notes.
the answer to the questions is basically, so remember, the rule is this. So these are creatures who are the members of the foot. If
Mhm.
they lose their feet, they're better off dead. And that's the horses and the raptors. Um, the it's interesting because the word rapture, which is very popular again, because it's the end of the world because someone's not president. The word means to grasp. So the raptor family is grasping. And of course, if you've watched, boy, it became a lot easier to explain raptors after Jurassic Park.
Yes.
So yeah, so the law of the foot, and that ties in directly to what he's about to learn. His biggest lesson is what's the first law of the foot, and of course,
Mhm.
what is it? Is to never let go,
Right.
which is the title of my book. And it's once you grab onto something, you never let it go. And it's lovely, to be honest with you. It's been the phrase that I've used my entire career as I guess my mission statement is make a difference, but my motto is never let go. And I remember reading it for the first time, and it just hit me. It just really just bounced off my soul. It's like, wow, that's beautiful. And here we are, 51, 2 years later, and it's still bouncing off my heart. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you if that always jumped out at you or if it
Mhm.
was on, several readings, because there's certain things that have jumped out to me, but there are certain things that have
Mhm.
stuck with me from the beginning. So that was always something really meaningful for
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Well, it is. And I mean, there's so much in this chapter. Um, well, one thing I want to make, I mean, just the family and the Talons and Balin and Balin, by the way, are phrases that show up quite a bit. Um, if you read the Lord of the Rings, I think both of them are dwarves. I think both of the names are dwarves.
Mm, okay.
Um, but there's also there also a ballad that I know that Mallory wrote about those two names, but I don't think and it might be in the Death of Arthur. I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so in the end though, Wart's analysis, I guess, of his experiences that they were a horrible grand crew. So did he hate the experience, or because he enjoyed being a bird, but then it because they were a little bit harsh, or um what are your thoughts there?
So it's one of the things you have to remember is that the raptors that are in the keep here in the Muse, I guess,
Hmm.
they consider themselves a military band.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Colonels,
And
and they were used to rank.
colonels, and there's and of course the parson accidentally eats the other things because they're always hungry. They're all hungry. They only think about food. And Wart is getting exposed to a high-end military cadre that has deep roots, and they have a whole hierarchy.
Hierarchy. Hmm.
They have their own rules. They have their own customs. And when he says at the end, a horrible grand crew, boy, I might even have to I might even have to see. Let me just check what I have here for notes, because
So that's technically like when he wakes up. So that's like line one of this next chapter. But I know that they put him in this position where he had to choose between confessing himself as human or not learning more of their secrets. And it was an uncomfortable situation for him. And he didn't want to be a coward. That's how actually White wrote it. He did not want to be a coward. And
Right.
so that's, I think, always a point of contention as well, especially with his dynamic with Kay. He's
Yeah.
always trying to prove himself.
Well, and then also too, they try to kill him,
Yeah,
which
there's that.
you can't really ignore the fact that his test of strength is to stand near a crazy molting, big bird that wants to kill him. And the bell rings and all that stuff goes on. And then, I mean, and they're just, and then of course, after they ring, they start, after everything, the story's over, they start singing,
But it does seem like he's infiltrating, like you said, this military band that it's really hard to just work your way in one night. Like these Raptors, they've been in it from the beginning together, and so you can't just join. It's like they're in a clique, they're in a very specific group. And so yeah, so it just feels like he didn't enjoy the experience.
Well, I don't know. Did you go? Is the next chapter? I don't. Okay, I guess it does. The next chapter have the fist fight between
Yes. So
Kay?
chapter 9 wakes up where he said it was what a horrible grand crew. And then Kay's like, I knew you weren't in your bed. I caught you. And then they get into the fight. And then, since Kay was older and bigger and he was going to win, he was,
Yeah,
he was more nervous and imaginative. And then, of course, when he started to bleed, he told the nurse that he knocked it on the bedpost.
right. So
He didn't want to
'cause,
rat
yeah,
out
Wart.
Kay.
Yeah, Wart has a black eye and Kay has a bloody nose.
Mm.
And this ties us instantly into the next really big journey with the Robin Wood and all that.
Right, right,
The,
right.
the segue, yeah, boy, I don't know. The the one thing is that the birds know more than they think too. I mean, the birds know that this is King Arthur. If you go to uh, Balin, I'm quoting you now. Okay, I'm going to quote this. But Wart, the king of Merlins, struck foot most far before us. His birds and beasts supply our feasts, and his feats our glorious chorus. Mark my words, cried the beautiful Balin. We shall have a regular king in that young candidate. Now, boys, chorus to get all together for the last time. But Wart, the king of Merlins, struck foot most far before us. His birds and beasts supply our feasts, and his feats our glorious chorus. Yeah, it's they. This is the. We'll pick this up. Well, no, we already picked this up in the Madame Mim story, if you recall, that the goat went down on all four knees because he was going to be the emperor, and so this is kind of the foreshadowing. I mean, it shouldn't surprise you that this Wart guy is going to be King Arthur, and he's probably. I don't want to hate to ruin the finish for you, Mimi, but there's a good chance he's going to pull a sword out of a stone.
Right.
You know, you
Yep. It happens.
yeah, I didn't want to surprise you too much.
Right, right. Spoiler alert, everyone.
Spoiler, yeah.
The sword gets pulled from the stone.
So it's a marvelous. Now it's interesting. I like what you're saying here. On Wart wanted to do anything to get out and have an adventure. He gets one, then he's pissed off about the adventure.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want to read too much into it. I mean, I don't want to go too far. I don't want to get too far. But I tell you one thing. My father of blessed memory, who we've mentioned before, his curse was, "I hope you get everything you want."
Mhm.
That was his curse.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's in my life. I've met people who are just horrid, and they tell me things, and I think to myself, well, I hope you get everything you want, because that's a terrible life. I don't know where this came in, but I thought about this for the first time in probably decades the other day. So I'm about 25, maybe 24, maybe younger. And at my first parent teacher conference at Judge Memorial, So it's got to be fall of 81 or 82, whatever it was. Okay. No offense, I don't remember. But I do remember this, is that one of the first parents I'm going to teach sits down with me and of her child, and she describes what her daughter is going to be like. And she says, well, my daughter is going to be a varsity cheerleader when she's a sophomore, and then she's going to go to Notre Dame University and be a cheerleader there. And I just, the way she said it, I thought to myself, oh my God, you're crazy. Now, this is before true helicopter parenting and all that. But I remember this, Mimi, like it was yesterday. And of course, the girl never graduated from judge. She didn't go to Notre Dame. She wasn't a cheerleader. She was, her mom raised her to be a horrible human being, and she became one very, very, very well, in fact, and her mom was too. But sometimes when you give somebody everything they want, it's the worst thing you can possibly have. I mean, we talk about this. I talk about it in a number of my books about how many swimmers, especially, win an Olympic gold medal and then never go back in the pool again, ever. People say they'll do anything for this or that, and maybe they get there, and very often you find out, that, to quote the great singer in the 60s, is that all there is? Is that all, Peggy Lee, is that all there is, my friends? Then let's get dancing. And you can get your dream and be like, what a, so many people in Hollywood, they get the show, and then they seek, a lot, they seek out drugs and alcohol. And I'm not pointing fingers or anything. I'm just saying it is an interesting
and
thing.
often die from
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
So
So they could not have been happy.
Yeah. So T.H. White, I think, does a nice job here, kind of showing this thing where very often Wart will get what he wants and then not be happy about it after.
Yeah.
This story, I don't know. And Kay's jealousy is, of course, is an engine that drives the next part of the story. So that works out.
And I think, and what I always love about Wart, though, is that he loves Kay. Like, he really loves him, even though he gets beat up, he gets picked on, he gets, but when he says Merlin does everything for you, but he never does anything for me, Wart, what does it say? At this, the Wart felt he had been a beast. He dressed himself in silence and hurried off to find Merlin. So even though he was angry, he was grumpy from the night before, he was sleeping, and then they fought, like, all of that. As soon as he realized Kay's feelings were hurt, it was just like, and that's like that fraternal love, I think, is something that I've come to learn to understand, because I have what's considered like Kung Fu brothers. They've been with me for pretty much my whole life, and we're not biological siblings, but it's like that love for them. Like, even when they pick on me when I was growing up, or even when they were, angry and stuff, like, there's some sort of special bond. And I really love that, his compassion for Kay, even though I find Kay to be really annoying.
He is. And don't forget, the first thing he does when he finds Merlin is ask him, how come Kay can't have these experiences? And and of course Merlin says, I'm not here for Kay, I'm here for you, which should kind of, Wart's correct response should have been, why are you here for me? What is it about me? Instead, he's like, oh, okay.
Right over his head. And then he said, it's unfair. That was what he was thinking. He was doing the teenage boy thing. It's unfair.
Life's unfair.
Right.
Good. This chapter is a thick chapter. I think when I did my Sword in the Stone project, I think it took me, I wouldn't say months to get through it, but I took my time. It was, do I have it up? Hang on. Oh, I do. I spent a lot of time on that. There's all these Shakespeare references in Cully, and there's all this stuff going on. And, Cully understanding his madness. Please don't stand near me. I'm crazy. Okay. I mean, that is just, oh, and then of course, he when Wart slips and he says warned, I was warned, and the colonel says, warned? You were warned by whom? There's a lot going on, and of course it's a fantasy, so we don't have to dig too deeply, but it is a thick, fun chapter, and I always thought it was marvelous. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, your notes are pretty extensive, especially on Cully and the things he says. Like,
Yeah.
he's deep in the molt and and things like that. But
Which I
um,
didn't know. I didn't know what a molt was, so I had to look up. That was one fun thing, and I would recommend a gentle listener, if you do have a favorite book, um, reread it again with a dictionary and look up those words. And I did that with I reread The Sword and the Stone one time. No, The Sword and the Stone. The first Harry Potter, Philosopher's Stone or Sorcerer's Stone. And I didn't bounce. If I didn't know a word, I looked it up. Now, fortunately, we have the internet now, because a lot of the things they use are British terms that I didn't get. They don't, here in the United States, we call it's called Scotch tape here in the United States. In fact, there's a Scotch logo on it. Over in England, they call it cello tape, cellophane tape.
like cellophane, like it's clear. Yeah.
Yeah, and then, but JK changed it to spello tape.
Oh.
So I missed the point entirely.
Right. Oh my gosh.
Until
Yeah, and
later,
also the spelling kind of throws you off too sometimes.
every so often, depending on the
Yes.
version. One of the things over in my library here is I've been collecting. I have an Arabic version of the sort of the first Harry Potter. I've got the Old Irish. I've got Swiss. No, check that. Swedish, Norwegian, Polish, German, Turkish. So I'm collecting the different language versions. And of course, people ask me, why do you do that? And I look at them like, I don't know. I have no idea.
So when you get those different versions and you go through it and look at it and kind of well, I guess if it has an like traditional alphabet, you can almost make things out, especially if it's like maybe Italian or French or something. But
Yeah.
like these
Yeah.
other ones, do you're like, I know where we are. We're in chapter 2, so this is happening. Does it feel like you can read those different languages
Yeah.
because you know it so
Now,
well?
now, what's interesting you say that, because I have those even in my own case. Okay, so even my own books. So I got a German copy, I have it in Slovakian. Okay, that's Korean. Oh yeah, well, I don't. Can you read Chinese?
Illiterate. It's horrible.
So here's Never Let Go
Yeah.
in Chinese.
I
And
mean, I can pick out like a character here and there, but it would not be very useful. Like the
I
word
can't pull
I
off
or
a single
something.
thing. Now, what was fun is when I was going through the Sword and the Stone in the German translation,
Okay. Yeah.
which I thought I had it right here. Sorry for being a little this. Oh, do you mind if I walk over for a second?
No problem.
I hope it's there. I'm still here. I can hear you, so don't say that.
Okay.
Yeah, here it is. Yeah. And this is actually something I'm going to start working on, is other translations. But my friend Patrick gave this to me, which means a lot. So here's the Sword and the Stone. Das Schwert in Stein. It's pretty easy. Roman, yeah. But you can go through it. I can go through it well enough. And you did not. Like, I know what's going on in the chapter.
Right. Well, I think if any book you could do it with, it's definitely this one. Especially because you've retyped it and you've gone through it with a fine comb.
Yeah. So what's nice sometimes about reading another language, even if you're not good at it, they have to translate something as close as they can. Well, why is that a big deal? Well, sometimes when you see what a translator is doing, all of a sudden it'll just pop and unpack everything for you. The word Camelot might come from the old language, meaning wandering marsh. Well, when I say wandering marsh, that completely changes what Camelot should be. Camelot, certainly, if Arthur existed, there was certainly no, ivory towers with, with necks like gazelles and stuff. But when you read something like Wandering March, it changes your head, and then when I was teaching the Sword and the Stone years ago, the students would ask me about, what does this image of the Sword and the Stone mean? And I would say, well, I'll be safe. Don't worry, I won't hurt myself. I would generally come up with several, but one of the things I said is that, Arthur has a foot probably in the Bronze Age and a foot in the Iron Age. So when you start smelting things into iron, the sword literally comes from the stone. And they would be like,
whoa.
I've read that there is a bit of a phallic interpretation that you could make, which, I don't know how truthful that one is. And then, of course, the name Excalibur comes from ex, to exit, calcium, stone, liber, to free from stone. So the name Excalibur, all it means is the sword that's been freed from the stone. That's all it means.
Right.
But when you watch a movie like Excalibur, which has some really interesting, Liam Neeson is in the movie. He is he's a drunken Celt, of course, which bothered me. Jean-Luc Picard is in it. Patrick Stewart. There's just so many famous people in the movie. And Helen Mirren is in there. She's the one who walks around near naked the entire time.
The lady.
If you watch it, she looks pretty good, damn it. But when you watch a show like Excalibur and they're throwing the sword into the lake so the lake can get it, now you're compounding stories from this generation with this area with that area. So there is great value in knowing words. To quote my good friend Shakespeare, words. Yeah, there's great value into doing that. Yeah.
Nice. So do you want to, we are kind of at the end, we kind of discussed 8 and we sort of started into 9. Do you want to try to wrap into 9? I did want to ask you if you watched the new Dune movie. I wanted your opinion on that.
Well, I will say this. I was pleased with the Dune movie. They made some character decisions. I think they did a smart thing. If you get too caught up, like they're ignoring the Space Guild, the navigators, which I'm not ignoring, but it's just like, yeah, they're around, they get around. Okay. If you get too deep down the wormhole of some of the stuff in Dune, you wouldn't be able to make a movie. The sci-fi version, I thought, did a real nice job with the navigators, but they had 13 and a half hours to do that.
Right.
And a 5-hour film. So I like some of the edits. I think they made Stilgar. I think they did a good job with Stilgar. Aquaman as Duncan Idaho. I think anybody in Hollywood could have done Duncan Idaho. And maybe I'll probably piss off some. I thought he was. To me, I wish they would have had somebody a little bit more swashbuckling versus just big.
Okay.
Maybe if they're going to have maybe a Mimi Chan as Duncan, and somebody that is I thought that, and I'm just if you're gonna switch parts around, might as well do something. Having it's actually a theme of The Sword and the Stone and Dune,
Ooh.
is that you always have to be rather careful about your first perceptions.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
You know, Arthur is certainly not the strongest man in the kingdom, but he pulls the sword out of the stone. And Paul Atreides is certainly not the biggest, strongest fighter, but he's the one that, gets puts. I don't want to. No spoiler alert here,
Mm-hmm.
but things happen. Uh, so, so yes, I did like it. I enjoyed it a lot. So I watched. I went to the movies a couple of times. I went and saw French Dispatch, the new Wes Anderson film,
Oh,
which I liked.
how was that?
It wouldn't be the kind of film I would say, oh my God, everyone must see it, because there is a bit of a taste to a Wes Anderson
I
film.
love Wes Anderson films.
Yeah. So if you like Wes Anderson, you'll like the film.
Okay.
And even if you don't, you might still like it. What's the other movie I saw? Went saw. Oh, and then of course, I saw Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which I thought was absolutely fantastic.
Really?
Mhm. And the nice thing was, the three of us who were in the theater that day, probably the only three people in Utah to have seen the movie. So that worked out. Sir Gawain, of course, is an important figure in the Arthurian legends,
Mhm.
but he is it's been I really do need to teach a course on this, but Sir Gawain is an ancient, the Green Knight is an ancient character. If you would go to almost any cathedral in the world and go to the woodworking, you'll find the Green Knight in there. Um, uh, the idea, and of course in Christian theology, the idea that if you take the deity and you plant the deity in the ground, it will rise back up. Uh, if you go to the Polynesian cultures, this many of their stories involving the coconut, that looks like a human. It's got the two eyes, doesn't it? It is a motif that really does travel the planet about how you kill the god so that the god can come back. And I really enjoyed the film. They didn't make it as clear as some stories at the end, but that I thought it was really good, and I really liked the choice of who they used as Sir Gawain.
Okay.
He wasn't some blonde-haired, blue-eyed Dan John, with big traps and guns.
There's a time and place for that,
Yes, yes. Um, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So I guess those are the films, and it's weird. I'm not a big fan of going to theaters. Don't take this wrong, gentle listener. I don't like people in theaters. There's nothing worse than when theaters. The one guy at Dune got up 4 times to go get more food, and the guy behind us, back up there, was telling his girlfriend, "So, Muad'Dib means desert mouse."
Yeah, it can be a pretty annoying experience. I can
And I'm
see.
just an old grumpy fart, and I know that too, so I'm okay. Um,
Oh, but I'm glad you enjoyed it, because someone being so close to,
mhm.
the book and the comprehension of the story, and having that attachment, it's always disappointing when you're like heartbroken, because of course different media, it can't be exactly like the book, right? That's a book, this is a movie, this is so of
Yeah.
course not, but sometimes they really just destroy
Oh
this
yeah, and they're
vision.
gonna do.
So so I'm glad that you enjoyed it, because I enjoyed it, but I will be honest, I had a lot of trouble reading the book. And I will say, it's not reading. I did audio, and maybe that was also why it was a little confusing for me. I had a hard time. So Oscar
You know,
got through it and enjoyed it by the time he was done, but he was like me, where it was like, what is happening? Halfway through, I was still not sure what was
yeah,
happening.
I could. Certain books go well in audio.
Yeah.
Hunt for Red October might be one of the best audio books I've ever read,
Really?
because Hunt for Red October breaks the audio, because Clancy's book is a chapter. So a paragraph or two switches directions, paragraph or two switches places, paragraph or two, switches characters, paragraph or two, switch. So it lends itself to a drive across the country. I could see that Dune would be tough. You do have to read backwards sometimes.
Okay.
I think with Dune. Some books. I mean, I think like Beau Geste is it's a book that is a massive book. The Unabridged is massive. Count of Monte Cristo, massive books, and they lend themselves to audio and a long drive. Folks, audio without the car is tough. I don't know how you do it, because what's nice about the audio is that these are stories, and these new character shows up. But if you're driving, you got plenty of time, and you're not gonna skip. You got plenty of time to let this particular aspect finish. Murder mysteries don't tend to be very. Some authors don't tend to be very good in drives. Murder mysteries, and because I think you need to sometimes stop, go back, go, oh yeah, okay, that's a red herring or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. So yeah, one thing I do want to bring up though about Paul Atreides is he has both parents, which is very unusual for a hero. So that puts him in the Batman camp, but with an asterisk, because Batman's mother died too in the holdup. So Paul Atreides is kind of unique for a hero. Yes, his father dies, and yeah, his mom is transformed into something else, but he does have parents, which is kind of unusual because Wart doesn't. The question, Jesus in Nazareth, Moses has the question. Superman, of course, has two sets of parents with all those issues going on. Theseus doesn't know his father is. Hercules doesn't know his father is. Perseus doesn't know his father is. It is just a standard part of Western civilization. Now, would you help me with, like, I know in Mulan, was she missing a mother?
No. In I'm trying to recall like the Disney thing. I mean, no, she's just close to her father.
She's close to her father.
Yeah.
So with the heroine, very often, you very often will have the missing mother, who Frozen. They lose their parent. The girls lose their parents before they really get a chance to understand. But very often with females, there will be a woman, and she's the stepmother, the evil stepmother.
Right.
And that's even true in something as recent as The Sound of Music. You have the evil, if you watch the movie, it's the Julie Andrews character, the innocent, wins over the colonel, whatever it is.
Yes, with the whistle.
With the whistle, and the
lines.
Yeah. But when you go through the, Cinderella is a stepsister situation, I think.
Yep.
Of course, the girl gets stuck with the pin.
Rapunzel?
Is that Sleeping Beauty with
Sleeping
the three?
Beauty. Oh, with the fairies? Yeah, Sleeping Beauty.
She's raised by the
Aurora.
Aurora.
Yeah.
And I don't. And this is only somebody who takes it as seriously as me. And gentle listener, I apologize because I'm a lunatic. You start to pick up on that motif after a while, and it'd be interesting for you with your background to see. So Carl Jung argued that the reason you want the orphan is that the entire community adopts the person.
Ah, okay, yeah.
Now, when you study the story, as you watch and learn Dune, you'll see that the story might change a little bit, but again, he's adopted by the community. And at the end of that, at the recent Dune, you see when the moment is, he has to kill his way into the community, which is very, frankly, it's a little unusual, but it's the way it's done in that book. So it's the question of fatherhood is a big issue in the Western civilization's male hero. In Western civilization's female hero, an unreliable female figure is often in the world.
Mhm.
and that is something that shows up. But I know that's just, it's Western, and I'm always interested. I know some about other, um, heroic things, but it's clearly a Western thing, yeah, as I understand
Yeah. Well, we know that Disney basically will always murder one or both parents right at the beginning of any of their movies. So then we're immediately feeling sorry for that
it. Yeah,
character.
you can say that, but it's also so built in, you can't. So that just is what we expect by a hero.
Right, right, of course.
Even Beauty and the Beast, which I kind of think they invented the story, right? The Beauty and the Beast that's in the movie, I don't know
Yeah,
if
I
it
don't know
comes.
about Mauricio, like hit the dad. I'm not
Yeah,
sure about any of
but
that.
you have a
Yeah.
father and no,
No
you have
mom.
no,
Yeah.
no
No mother.
mom, and other female role models. You got the three dancing girls who are hot, but you don't really have. Oh, and then outside of the, the kettle and the pot and all that. But it's interesting, and it's something when you start to pick up on these things. For example, there's always another motif. Which really does Arthur go through? The hero almost universally has a voyage underground. Jesus with the 3 days of death, he journeys underground. Um, Pinocchio, of course, inside the belly of the
The
whale.
whale.
Jonah inside the belly of the great fish. Um, every single Potter book has a journey underground. Every
Mm,
single one. Every single one.
interesting.
And if you say, well, book 7 doesn't, you say, well, when Harry died, that wasn't a journey underground. So yeah, so it's a standard. So you start to see these things flow up and out, and then you start to, the important thing is the important thing about all this, and just to finish my point, meaning, is that, well, what does that mean? Well, it means that if you want to live the heroic lifestyle, you're gonna have to eat a shit sandwich or two. If you want to be, I mean, you think about what happens. You get this, 17-year-old boy coming out of high school and he joins the Marine Corps, and he comes out a different person for the rest of his life. At the end of that, he becomes a Marine, and even if he joins the Navy, he's still a Marine for the rest of his life. It is a
Hmm.
life-changing thing. And I talk about that with my athletes. I tell my athletes about the dark night of the soul. You want something bad to happen to you as an athlete. Well, you don't want it. You want the injury that you have to rehab and come back from. You want to lose in the last second, and because that's when the music starts. Dun, 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 dun. It's when the bolero begins.
Valero. Yeah, I love it.
And that's, it's the Now What, that brilliantly titled book that author wrote. Oh, me. It's the now what. It's the now what moment. It's like, well,
Yeah.
now what? Well, I just, high school kid, I just spent 6 weeks of my life doing everything I could to win this game. 6 weeks, huh? Let's get around, my athletic career, 1967 to, I gotta, I mean, I'm getting ready. I don't have any plan. Our state doesn't have one coming up, but I'll be in a weightlifting meet within the next 3 months. Since 1967, I have, answered the call and, risen up. And I have failed over and over and over again. But here's the beautiful thing about that, is that all my greatest successes come from my failures. And to quote Don Quixote, because each time I fall, I shall rise again, and woe to the wicked. So that is what we're learning in this story. We are walking in the hero's journey. Beowulf, is the same story.
Hmm.
Uh, different audience, different style of telling. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so true. I mean, we can't learn unless we have the adversity, and like you said,
Mhm.
the wish of I hope you get everything you want, because then you won't really ever get that happiness, right?
My father's curse.
Yes, the curse.
Isn't that fascinating how we came? Thank you for remembering that, because what we just did, we did full circle. So
Mhm,
there were probably a listener too who's going through a tough time.
mhm.
And the words of Don Quixote: "Each time I fall, I shall rise again, and woe to the wicked." What the hero's journey teaches us is bad times. Oh yeah, there's gonna be bad times. As the poet Chumbawamba taught us, I get knocked down, but I get back up again. That was a bit of a joke, but okay.
Oh my goodness. Well, as always, it is a extreme pleasure to talk to
Thank
you
you.
and learn from you. And we will pick up in chapter 9 next time we
Chapter
talk, halfway through
9.
chapter 9. So that's kind of the it's
Oh,
pretty
no, no, no,
typical-ish.
no. Yeah, if you want to put together those next few chapters, we can do that. But
No rush. I enjoy our
no rush. I got the
conversations.
rest of my life. Okay.
I enjoy it. I enjoy it.
You bet.
Dan, thank you so much as always for being a guest on the show and
Absolutely.
spending time with me.
We'll talk soon.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook.